Hello and welcome to episode 39 of Match It and the Other Guy. Kevin and I are sitting outside my home on the sunny, warm, quite blowy banks of Lake Wylie. Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm good. You're right, the wind is up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'll take it. I'll take a breeze across this porch.
Yes, that breeze makes all the difference because the sunny summer weather down here, as we've said before, can be quite humid, but having this wonderful breeze blowing is terrific. I never know what we're going to be talking about, but you do, Kevin. So, what is our topic of conversation for today?
Well, I think in keeping with the themes of summer and fun and such like that, I thought we'd talk about games. Games that we played as a kid. Not particularly board games, but games with groups and being out with the friends and being outside.
Yes.
Those type of games.
All right, start us off. What games did you use to play as a
Well,
kid?
one that I got reminded of very, very recently was how much we enjoyed playing Marco Polo in our friend's pool.
Yes, okay. Now, I am only fairly recently educated or aware of Marco Polo, because if you told me this 5 years ago, I would have had no clue what you're talking about.
Either that or the Geico ad.
Right. That's right.
With the real Marco Polo.
Yes. We never played Marco Polo over in England. Not to my knowledge. I could never remember anybody playing it. Tell me the rules of Marco Polo.
Okay, you're in a pool, and whoever's, I guess it was it. Whoever's it has to close their eyes.
Yes.
And I think you go under and count for however many seconds it was. It's
Not
been
45 seconds or something.
No, you count for 3 minutes. No. And then you pop up and you say Marco, and everybody that's in the pool or above water has to say polo. They're required to say polo.
Okay.
And like if you hear them right to your right, you lunge at them, and if you touch them, they're now it. So the goal is they're trying to avoid you.
Yes.
But they have to give you the callback when you say Marco.
So you just close your eyes if you are it.
Yes.
You have no mask or dark glasses
A
or something.
mask would come in handy, I guess,
don't know.
but yeah,
Right.
we always just close your eyes, and you're kind of supposed to use the honor system.
Okay.
But granted, I mean, you may be playing the guys like I have a real good memory of us playing when we were about 15 or 16. The guys I skated with, we went this summer and just played all the time, and there was about 4 of us, and so the same guys. But you come up, and let's say I came up and I said Marco, but I only heard 2 polos back.
Yes.
Well, then the other one's underwater somewhere
Right.
because he's not required to if he's underwater because he can't hear you.
Right.
So I would, okay, so somebody's under the water, and their pool wasn't huge. It wasn't like his Olympic-sized pool or anything.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't realise there was so much strategy involved in this game. I'm very excited by it.
but then the other good caveat was you could get out of the pool, but we played with the rule that part of your body had to be touching the water. So you could come around the edge, but like you had to keep your finger in the pool as you went around.
Okay.
But if you heard somebody make a movement and they were diving into the pool and they were in midair and you
Yeah.
said fish out of water, they were now it because they violated not touching the water.
Wow.
And so because they may try to get up and run around the perimeter of the pool and jump in at the other end.
Yeah.
But if you yelled fish out of water while they were not touching water,
Yes.
they're automatically it.
Why they were a fish out of water.
Yeah.
Yeah. And forgive my ignorance here on the subtleties of Marco Polo. Why was the game called Marco Polo?
No idea.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a reason.
so relieved you said that
It's not
because-
going to come from me.
I thought I was missing something very obvious in my education there. I'm aware of Marco Polo. I'm not aware of why Marco Polo, the pool game, was so cool.
Yeah. I have no idea, but
An explorer crossing the oceans, maybe? Maybe?
who knows? Again, it's something to do a little research on the net. But,
But I never realized there was this thing about if you were underwater, you didn't have to declare your position in the pool.
well, you couldn't. I mean, obviously, you're not going to hear the
Yeah.
Marco
Yes.
and such like. But occasionally, you'd easily be playing, and you may go underwater, because you could do anything. You kind of always had your hand stretched out because you didn't want to conk your head on the side of the pool. But I may go under and just kind of make a movement, and I might just jerk right. Because
Yeah.
who knows, somebody might be swimming right next to me, and if I caught him, I caught him.
Yeah.
So, but I still remember vividly, like the person being it, and me swimming like underwater, kind of behind them, like 2 feet, and I would just make movements, to kind of slowly waft myself backwards
Sure.
or something like that. So
Yeah.
if he jerked around, he went, touched me on the head or something.
Yeah.
But I'd say we spent that summer playing that so many times. It's just fun, you know. And we probably got the most amazing tans that year. And it was great in Central Florida in the middle of summer to be in a pool too, rather than on the ramp skating all day. We probably did both. Probably skated most of the day and in the afternoon hit the pool. But that was one of those just fun summer activities of that age,
Now, I remember with my school friends, we never used to play pool games. Although we did actually have a little swimming pool at our primary school, elementary school in America. And I remember I was at that school when that pool was built. It was all extremely exciting that we were going to have a swimming pool. And it was great. It was tremendous fun. But one of the things my school friends and I used to play every summer vacation was to build a raft in one or two of the local lakes that were around, little ponds more than lakes. We shouldn't have been doing it because they were on somebody else's land, but we would sneak into the land where there was little trout pool or trout pond, and by using anything that was lying around, planks of wood or something, we would make a little raft and row across from one side to the other. And inevitably, the landowner would come out and would complain at us, and we would always try and paddle to the opposite side of the pond, wherever the owner was. I know who your parents are. I'll make sure you don't do this again. But we'd try and avoid them as much as possible. Now, with that in mind, I remember reading Three Men in a Boat, one of my favorite books by author Jerome K. Jerome, that was written in, I want to say, 1889. And there is a scene that he recounts in that book when he was a young man with his friends doing exactly that. They would go to a pond or a lake somewhere and build a raft using whatever's equipment was around, nails or a bit of rope and a few planks. And I thought, good gracious, they was doing exactly the same as what we were doing in the 1970s, and this was 18-something.
Yeah,
how remarkable.
fantastic.
Yeah, but again, we should not have been doing it. So
what happened at the end of the season? Where each year you have this collection of rafts that was building up?
That's right, we just leave them there, we just leave them.
Did you ever find them again, or they just kind of get washed away?
No.
Fall apart and wash away.
Believe me, they were nothing very grandiose, and I think the farmer or landowner would just reclaim his planks of wood, and that would be the end of that. But we used to enjoy doing that. Yeah. What other summer games did you play in the States?
Well, we'll go to another pool one. When I was a kid, we belonged to the club down the way, and my dad this is when Dad was working, and I would go to the pool, and of course, again, I think we touched on this before. Looking back, it seemed like the most massive pool in the world.
Sure.
And, seeing it like in my 20s, it was like it shrunk.
Yeah.
But you would get to where in the area where is actually where the the competitive lanes were, and the depth was probably, I don't know, let's say 4 feet, maybe something like that. And we play a game called Shark.
Okay.
And then let's say it's me starting out as the shark. Everyone else is called a minnow. And they would line up across the pool.
Okay.
And I can't remember what you'd holler out, but it was like, go. And they would all dive in and try to make it to the other side of the pool.
Right.
Across the length of those racing lanes.
Yes.
And anybody that I touched then became a shark.
Ah.
So, but they're doing, you had your boundaries. You couldn't go too far to the right, too far to the left. You had the lines of the lanes that you said, or these are our boundaries. But, let's say, 18 people jumped in, and I was able to tag 2.
Yes.
Well, now
you got 3 sharks.
Now we got 3 sharks trying to touch 15 swimmers.
Yes.
So eventually you ebbed it the other direction, where you're getting more and more sharks until you got that last minnow who's diving in against 17 sharks, trying his best to make his way to the other side.
Fabulous.
So that worked out. That was always a lot of fun.
Another great favourite of my school friends and I when we were in the summer holidays was always making what we'd call dens. We would go into the woods, and there was a lot of very dense bracken in the woods.
What's bracken?
Bracken is fern.
Oh, okay.
Fern plants, but known as bracken, and it was tremendously good roofing material. And so we'd go into fields or into the woods and make these little summer dens. And the idea of the game was really, it was find the opponent's den. So we would build, my friends and I would build one somewhere, and then some other friends would build one somewhere else, and then we'd sort of creep through the woods trying to find where they are, and they would creep back through the woods trying to find us. You know?
Very good.
Yeah. We kind of like that. But just being, basically in the summer, just being outside, doing anything outside. The last thing you wanted to do was to be in home, right? Anything to get out of being in home was what we would do. Just to be outside, just to be in the fresh air. And those games would last all, again, we've talked about this in another episode, those games would last literally all day long.
Yeah.
You know, get out of the house by 9 o'clock, have a bowl of cereal in the morning and leave home by 9 and be back by 6 in times for beans on toast and Star Trek at 7.
Mm-hmm. Which is a whole lot better than sitting at home watching the TV all day.
Believe me, yes, I feel very sorry for the generations that cannot. You know, the world is different now, and I understand that to a large degree, but anything that you can do to get out and just experience the world, please do. Turn the TV off, turn the radio off, and get outside. Yeah.
Well, that reminded me of one we ended up doing. Now, this was probably freshman year of high school. It's funny the games you kind of get going when you're a teenager and the ones you did, when you're younger, but we were, of course, living in Leesburg, Florida. We know that. I went to high school, and this group of guys that I hung with in the neighborhood, we kind of got in this playing military, and we would use the unripened oranges, because there's citrus trees everywhere down there. I mean, granted, they probably belonged to somebody, and we probably shouldn't have been taking those off.
Yes.
But we would take the green oranges, which were pretty dense and hard.
Yeah.
And those were our ammo.
Yeah.
And we would, break off into, two groups, be it, let's say it was 5 people each.
Yeah.
And we lived in a neighborhood that had a little lake, pond-sized lake, right across the way from me. In fact, we were across the street from them, and their backyard backed up to it. And so you had to start in different areas, so you didn't know where you're starting from, and try to come across each other, and you could just pelt each other with these oranges as your ammunition. And I still remember that one of the other team's group got into one of those John boats, one of those little aluminum John boats that was on the water.
Yeah.
Well, they got into these deep reeds, and we knew they were out there somewhere, and we were throwing those oranges, and you'd hear kaplunk, kaplunk, and I threw one, and I heard clang, and I heard some loud expletives, and all of a sudden paddling like a mad person. So we knew where they were, and we just pelted that one area.
Sounds like playing battleships for real.
Exactly.
Yeah. Find out where they are in the reeds.
Yeah. And then the other one, the glorious moment of that, I think same afternoon, was one of them ran around a house, and I just arbitrarily flinged one completely over the house, and all I heard was, ow! So I nailed him from across the house, and I said, hey, sniper, I guess. But,
yeah, well, that's reminded me. I mean, we never used to have oranges in the same way you guys had them down in Florida, for example. But we did used to have a lot of apples. And one of the things that we always used to do as kids was what was known as scrumping. It was basically just like you're taking the oranges and claiming all innocence, and I'm sure somebody owned them, but we didn't know who it was. And we would do kind of the same thing with apples. We would scrump the apples come October time, September, October, and we would eat them. We would take a couple of apples off the trees and then go running away through the fields, and then we would eat them leaning against haystacks and all that sort of real fun things, Just a different time. It seems like
it almost sounds like a storybook, and people don't believe it really happened.
I mean, yes, it's like the darling buds of May, imaginary world, but the world.
It's like you're sitting there in a straw hat with a hayseed hanging out your mouth.
All that sort of stuff. And when we used to watch, all that used to happen. Yes, and we used to watch farmers chugging along on old tractors, down bumpy lanes, and they would have little pipes, puffing away on little pipes, and all that sort of stuff that you think. It's almost too imaginary to be real, but that was what our life was like. So we used to, scrumping apples used to be a big thing. Come the time for apples to be taken off the trees, but
that's the first time I've ever heard that term.
We never had grapes like down in France, and we never had oranges such as you guys did down in Florida. But just to be outside, to be exposed to the world was a wonderful experience. to sit at the side of a babbling brook and just look at the little fish in there.
Yeah.
You don't have to be doing anything when you're a kid, do you? You just need to be outside. Get outside. That's the message. That's the message from me today. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can take, you see that you go through your life and you do your life routines, but you could take a time and if you really concentrated on it and go into the woods and you can look at a little parcel of land 1 foot by 1 foot and study all the little the insects that are living in that, and you'd learn immensely and really take a minute look at the world.
Absolutely.
Yes,
and
you could see so much in just if you took the time to do it. And summer's the perfect time for kids to experience that type of stuff. And again, you've seen that one episode of whatever 15 times. Get out and do something. So anyway, hopefully we'll have kids doing more of that. But we try to do that with our daughter. Go out and experience things.
There is something. I'll tell you another great experience. I mean, we're kind of getting off games as summer games, but for those that have never been camping and have often wondered, should I go? Why would I do that? It seems just uncomfortable. Why would we just sleeping on rocks? Why would we do that? But one of the great joys of camping just for one night, to me, is set your little campfire, have something to eat as the sun is beginning to set. And of course, you're very restricted in terms of what light you have. You have a little flashlight or a torch, as you would say in England, or a little hurricane lamp. But basically, your day is organised by the arrival and the disappearance of daylight. Obviously, when it's dark, it's dark.
Yeah.
Can't do anything. But to be sitting in the countryside as the sun starts to set, you see the country and the countryside around you. It sounds like a cliche to say in a completely different light, but you do. You're aware of the noises around you beginning to change. The creatures of the day start to go quiet and the birds roost and become quiet, and then the creatures of the night start to come to the fore. And in the States, I mean, I've done this a couple of times up in Linville Falls area, up in the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I've just sat quietly by myself as the sunlight begins to go down. And then when you see that, this is something that I've never seen in England, when you see that first little firefly just flick across the setting sun, it's like, wow, what was that, Then flick, flick, and then there's more of them. And to me, it's a wonderful thing. But beyond that, to then go to sleep and experience the noises of the night that's all around you with wildlife, and if you're in the middle of the woods, you get a lot of it. But then, this is the thing that just, to me, is a very magical moment. It's the morning when night starts to fade away and you get that first tiny sense of the new day. And you miss all of this completely when you're in home. You wake up and it's suddenly light and it's a new day. But to watch that change of light from dark to pre-dawn to dawn to the mist and the fog just beginning to roll away to the first spikes of the sun shining through the trees and then to sunrise, and you just see the land change around you. And in England, my experience was you would always see, for example, the dew in the grass of the night time. It's not there at night when you go to sleep, when you're camping. But in the morning when you wake up, the grass is wet with dew. And as the sun creeps through the trees and you get those first bright spikes of sunlight shining through the trees, the dew starts to dissipate and evaporate off. And you can, within the space of an hour, just sitting there and watching what is happening around you, like the whole world changes completely from the nighttime to the daytime.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. Kids, get out there and go camping.
And it will do it again tomorrow.
It'll do it again tomorrow. Yes, absolutely, yeah. I love that about camping. I just think, like you were just describing, you could take 1 square yard of ground and just see the creatures that's in there and study them over a year. And that happens in camping to me all the time. It's just the world, you just see the world in an entirely different light. You are aware of things that you never thought you would be aware of.
Yeah.
Odd little things. It's like if you're camping near a tree with a hole in the tree, your eye keeps going to that hole in the tree, and you wonder what was living in that hole yesterday, what will be living in that hole tomorrow, and I don't know, it's odd little things like that. You just take notice of details that you would never think of taking notice of.
Mm-hmm. I think we touched on this maybe back in the bicycles episode, but you may drive down the same road for 5 years, but you go on a bike ride and you see things totally different because you're a little slower.
Yeah.
And you experience it differently, and you're going to experience it even further if you take a walk down that road. You're going to notice the undulations of the road. You're going to notice this rock on the side, or how this slopes over, or if you do it a few times, well, that changed from yesterday. What slightly changed the topography with the gravel?
You're spot on. Yeah, if you're walking down a country lane, you will see a rock, and your eyes will, you know where you are by the tiniest little details. You walk down it the next morning and see that same rock, and it could be a rock the size of a baseball, but you're aware of where it is.
Yeah.
But you miss all of that in a car. Of course you do. Yeah, you're right. So you pick it up on a bicycle, and you pick it up even more when you're walking. Yeah. Odd little things.
Yeah. Well, another one I remember that was a lot of fun that we just on the spur of the moment did. This was when I told you we go up every year. We went every year up to my sister's and stayed 3 weeks in the summer. Well, of course I knew the kids in the neighborhood that were around my age for a number of years, and we just always connected when I was up there, and we'd do stuff during the summer and all that while I was there. And one evening, this was again in high school, and I think it's kind of just us doing more kiddie stuff again, but we played a game of, I guess it was Kick the Can.
Okay.
And I could not tell you the rules of it right now, or if we even played by the right rules, but essentially on the kid across the street, on his sidewalk, we set a can. I think it was just a basic tin can for peas or something.
Okay.
And we just made the rule that everybody breaks off.
Yeah.
And I guess somebody's kind of guarding it, but they're trying to tag you. And then when they're away trying to tag somebody else, if you can run around and kick it,
yeah,
you've done something, and something changes. I don't remember, but I just remember that was the most fun evening of just out there, us doing that for hours probably, playing that game. And who knows if it was the correct way, but man, it was a ball.
I'm not sure. I'd be interested to know if there are a very specific, defined set of rules and regulations for Kick the Can.
Whatever we were playing, we had a
the sporting regulations and the technical regulations for Kick the Can 2021.
And it was probably more of an elementary kids game, but we were just like going, we're having fun. Of course, we had a mix of us. There were guys and girls out there, and we were just having a ball.
Get outside and do things. Yes, exactly right. That's not what we should be talking about, but it doesn't matter that we drift off. But you're right. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy that the world is not as safe as it used to be. And I remember that in England. Again, I've written about it and we've talked about it regularly, but in England, when I grew up in the 1960s, it felt absolutely perfectly safe to be outside and go anywhere. You felt no sense of danger. We were out in the middle of the countryside, we weren't in a town. I'm sure the towns were riddled with crime, but more so now. But yeah, the idea that you could walk around the village, everyone knew everybody else. There's a great sense of community about that.
That's a big part of it too, right there.
And again, as I've written about in These Desired Things, when I'm talking about my childhood, we had, as every little village did, one police bobby, and everybody knew who he was.
Who was yours?
It was Constable Cooper.
Constable Cooper.
And Constable Cooper rode a Raleigh 3-speed bicycle, black issued. Straight from the Nottingham
I was about to say, government issued, no frills.
From the Raleigh factory that was in Nottingham, which was based 15 miles away from where we lived. And you would never say a cross word to Constable Cooper, and if you did, he would go to your parents, and your parents would make sure you never said a cross word to Constable Cooper. And
bit of a gruff fella.
He was nice. He was, he knew.
But he was no nonsense.
It was absolutely no nonsense. It was like dealing with a sergeant major in the army. He would take care of you. He knew who you were. He knew who your parents were, who your guardians were, and if anything happened that shouldn't have been happening, he would make sure that your parents or guardians knew about it. You know. But it was a great sense of a completely different way of life. I suppose, again, my knowledge of America is very, very limited, but it always strikes me as small town America.
Yeah.
With every family knowing everybody else. You knew who run the hardware store and who run the who run the soda fountain or the pharmacy and the drugstore, and everybody knew everybody. That's not such a bad thing, is
No,
it?
it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
You know, we went from, you know, Knoxville, Tennessee to Leesburg, Florida, so we really went to a much smaller community, but it was still a city. You know, it wasn't as nearly as small as you're, you know, referring to.
Right.
But so I've never really lived in that really small town experience. But yeah, I mean, for some people, and that's the thing about, you know, even right now, there's so much diversity in our country. There's people that live that every day, and the people, you know, live in the middle of a metropolis and have never lived anywhere but a city apartment, and you know, the park is the closest thing they've ever gotten to grass. You know?
I think there is something fundamentally tragic in the knowledge that in contemporary society, in a town of any size, really, of any reasonably big size, it's quite likely you wouldn't know who your neighbours are in an apartment block, or who's living at the side of you, or 2 doors down.
Yeah.
That knowledge
It
is
does
gone
happen.
now, hasn't it? It's changed. Yeah. I think that's it's a terrible loss. That's one thing, Kevin, that I was so attracted to in France. I mean, I talked about just loved my years in France. Those 15 years in France were just some of the best years of my entire life. But it was more of that, a return to how life used to be, the values of how life used to be. That nobody would lock their door. Why would you do that? You know, why would you want to lock the door? And everybody was aware of everybody else, and we all took care of one another.
Well, I remember, you know, my younger years, we grew up, you know, again, referring back to Knoxville, but the street we lived on was a dead end.
Right.
And I think we've referred to it before too. Maybe there was, let's say, 6 to 7 houses on each side, so 12 to 14, maybe up the whole street. Maybe less, actually, when I sit and count them. But, you know, we knew everybody, of course, on that street.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some that, you know, they kind of had their own thing going, and we weren't, you know, we didn't really socialize with them, but, you know, you'd obviously see them driving down the street and
Yeah.
wave, and you knew who they were.
Sure.
And there were some that we, you know, saw and did things with quite a bit, or whatever. And they're very diverse in their ages. None of them had, there was no kids on my street, I will say that. They were all grown and out of the house by the time I came along. But we all, you know, my parents had been there for many years, and their kids had grown up with my parents being on the same street. So, but that's the closest I think we had a community in that, you know, neighborhood. Once you got past that street, it opened up to a little busier street.
Yeah.
And we really didn't know as many people, you know, outside of that. But
It's remarkable how the world changes, and there's nothing we can do about that, is there? It's just times change, the world changes. But I feel that loss of security, that loss of safety that you and I both experienced. This is another thing that always strikes me is it wasn't that long ago.
yeah,
30, 40, 50 years in our cases. But how was it 200 years ago or 300 years ago? Was it wildly different from our experiences of we knew the people in the village? I suppose communities may have been much smaller. I don't know.
well, one of the, you know, diversities was probably there wasn't probably a lot of time. The kids weren't playing because the kids were working. I think a lot of that was in the old, quote, olden days. You know, if whoever was working the field, whoever was able-bodied was out of bed and working the fields or working the orchard or
Yes, the good old days.
whatever.
I call them, yes.
So,
Not so much the good old days. Yes, I mean, I don't know. I think we lived in an absolute golden age as children. My school friends and I. And again, although I often say we hardly had anything, but we had all that we needed. We never had everything that we wanted, but we had everything that we needed. I think it was a very valuable golden time. George Orwell, funny enough, talking about golden time, this has just reminded me. George Orwell in 1984, and I know this book keeps cropping up in my life because it's had such an impact on me. But George Orwell, writing as Winston Smith, the central character of 1984, he has this same sort of sense of looking back. You can tell it's the author looking back on his own childhood. And he keeps describing this countryside where Winston Smith, the character, ends up visiting as the golden country. He keeps referring to it as it is my very own golden country, and he talks about the dace fish swimming in the ponds and hiding under the shadow of the overhanging branches, and and he talks of close bit pastures where the rabbits have been at work, and I think it's just a beautiful image that he was thinking about when he wrote that book in 1948. And so I always think, yes, it's interesting how folks always look back on their childhood with this, I guess I want to say it's rose-tinted glasses, and probably it is to an extent, but was that the same for every generation? I don't know. Woody Allen's movie, Midnight in Paris, picks up on the same theme, really, where, without destroying the movie, if anybody would like to see it, it's to do with time travel and each generation travelling back in time just a little bit to a different point in history, and Paris is history, and each generation is looking back through rose-tinted glasses to a previous generation.
Yep.
So, the days were much better before.
Yeah, I think with what everybody went through last year, there were some comments I saw online or something, like people talking about how, the good old days weren't really as good as we thought they were, but they're nostalgic, and we look back and we tend to remember the best parts of the good old days.
We do. There's no question of that.
And it's funny, my mom was always one of those that she would say, "Good old days, my butt." She's like, she was like, "I like my air conditioning. I like my washer and dryer. I know. She was like, "I don't want to have anything to do with those old things we had to put up with and all that." She was very much I'll take it the way I've got it now.
And I do get that, absolutely. I mean, different generations have lived through the Second World War. Previous generations lived through the First World War. Going back and back further, folks have had to live through the Great Depression, and folks have had to live through the Black Plague of the Middle Ages. Sure, I get all of that. I do, and I understand exactly what your mum was talking about.
Yeah.
I like my air conditioning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, she's like, "I wouldn't change it. Thank you."
Yes, but I wonder whether or not the values are worth holding on to. Which, unfortunately, I think they are sort of sifting through our fingers faster than we would like.
Very true. Very
true.
Well,
not to end when we're running out of time. Not to end that on a down note at all. I don't mean that, but I do think. I suspect that the generation of children now, your daughter, for example, 20 years from now, will look back on her childhood and think of it as a very special time that will never be repeated.
Yeah. Well, we hope so.
Right?
Yeah, that's what we're striving for.
Of course
we're trying to, we try to, make those memories and such like that. Yeah. And I think a lot of it too these days. Kids are more organized, like she is at summer camp. She's at summer camp right now.
Right.
So we put it in the organized sports and stuff like that, and that gives them that camaraderie and doing things with people. I think they'll look back on that, as golden time spent.
Yeah, I think so.
Even if that hadn't led to what they're doing later on in life, but it was time at that moment that they were enjoying.
Yes, that's exactly right. Those childhood memories are very special. But thinking, I'm just thinking about motor racing, because we spend much of our time chatting about motor racing, and much of my career has been about motor racing. But it's my experience that everybody who's been involved, in my case in Formula One motor racing, everyone who has been involved with Formula One at a particular era always thinks of that era as being their golden time, the golden era of the sport.
Yeah, I've heard you mention that a couple of
Yeah,
times.
I think there's much to that. I always think of the 90s as being the golden era of Formula One. Many folks may agree with me, many folks may disagree with me, but I think it was a wonderful time. Now, if you talk to David Hobbs, when he was involved in the sport in the 60s and 70s, I know that he looks back on that time with that same sort of rose-tinted glasses, I guess, looking back on that time. I'm sure folks that were racing in 1950 when the Formula One championship first started, they would look back on that time and think that's the golden time of motorsport. So I guess in the wider image, when we look at our childhood, it's a reflection of that. We always think of our particular childhood as being very special.
Yeah. Well, it's just like I think most people tend to think the greatest music was whatever music was when they were a teenager.
Yeah.
So that's a big. It's a soundtrack
That's
of your
true.
life. So
Yes.
they go, oh,
Yeah.
the greatest music was when MTV started, and people are like, are you crazy? The '70s and
Yeah, of
all the
course.
great
Yeah.
funk bands and all that were coming up, and the harder rock stuff was coming up, and then people are like, oh no, the '60s, the Beatles ruled everything, and so. But
Yeah. I do
those
like.
are many other discussions down the line. So.
I do like that idea now with the way modern technology works. Of course, we can just ask Amazon Music or Pandora, whichever streaming service we use, play music from the 1970s. I'll more come a selection from the 1970s, and I get enjoyment now from saying, I'll listen to that for 15 minutes. They play music from the 1960s, play music from the 1950s, and you can see that sort of back to the 1940s, to the 30s. And you see that sort of progression of music through the decades, and it's so easily done now with the streaming services we've got. It's kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, and to think about, not getting too off topic again, but talking about music is like,
I've completely forgotten what the topic is.
how many? We'll figure it out. How many people were, say, performing and recording music 100 years ago, and how that has just scalloped outward?
Yes.
How many choices there are now as compared to how many there were
Yeah.
5, 6, 7, 8 decades ago.
Yeah.
Who you could listen to and what was available and what style was available.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just going to get infinitely larger.
And yeah, I'm with you all the way, and it is the same with publishing. With writers have now got so many different outlets to put their own work out there, and an extension of that, of course, is we are all broadcasters. Hey, look what you and I are doing today. We couldn't do this 10, 15 years ago.
No.
Look at YouTube and all the different channels that are out on YouTube. That simply wasn't an option. So you're right, everything has blossomed and bloomed into, if you have something that you want to put out there to the world, there's a way of doing it, which not so long ago there wasn't. And we've chatted about this before, but the only outlet in England was, and this is the world news from the BBC, and this is the only truth you need to hear. It was that. There was nothing else. Yeah. How times have changed. Speaking of time, we'd better think about bringing this to a close.
We can do that.
Yeah.
We will return another day. So
I
we can
enjoyed
return
that.
it for a day. There we go.
What were we supposed to be talking about?
I think we started with summer games or related to it. So
Well, there we go. Summer games, gentle listener. I hope you enjoyed that. Join us
that
again.
in-depth discussion of purely summer games.
Oh boy, oh boy. Join us again on another episode of Matched and the Other Guy. Bye for now.
We'll see you then.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.